I have just returned home from the 770 kilometer ultra distance cycling event El Piri, where I finished first in a winning time of 56 hours and 14 minutes. The event started and finished here in Girona, going through the Spanish Pyrenees and back again, and had almost 20,000 meters of climbing. In today's episode, I want to walk you guys through exactly what I took with me on my bike along the way, and how I kept it so light and how it helped me ride so fast. If you haven't seen the video and you would like to watch the video of what I did and how I set that time, you can see that up here. But for the moment, let's jump into the bike that I took with me and we'll run through that first, and then I'll show you all the other accessories I took along the way. So first things first, the bike that I rode was my BMC Kaius 01 Limited. Now this is BMC's pure gravel race bike. I run a size 51 in this bike, which is effectively a size small. On the bike, I had a 100mm stem and 40 centimeter wide bars. Now that's a little bit shorter than I usually run on my road bike, but for gravel riding and bike packing events, I like having a slightly shorter bike overall because it's a little bit more comfortable, and after long days out there, you don't feel like your back is stretched out too much. The BMC Kaius is actually the same bike I rode for Badlands. Now, if you guys have been following me, you will have seen my Badlands video from last year. This bike is effectively exactly the same as what I rode at Badlands, and the actual setup is exactly the same as well. At Badlands, I did run aero bars on the front, which you can see there, but for El Piri, because of the style of the course and the profile along the way with the amount of climbing, I decided that aero bars would just be extra ballast, and I didn't actually need them because I wasn't going to be in them for that long. As you might have seen if you watched the video, there were not that many sections of flat along the way, so I wasn't going to be in the aero bars that much, and it meant that it was only going to be a disadvantage for climbing. The group set I had on the bike was the SRAM Red XPLR Axis wireless group set. Now this is a wireless group set, so just one battery in the rear end there, and as you can see, I was running a 1x setup. My chainring setup on the front was a 38 tooth chainring, and on the rear I ran a 1044 12-speed cassette. This was just enough to get me up everything. There were some extremely steep pinches in some of the Pyrenean mountains that we did for El Piri, and the climbs themselves were really long. I would probably have gone a 36 and even a 50 if I could have fit it with that group set, but I couldn't work a 50 tooth cassette with that XPLR rear derailleur. So for a bike packing event, I'd always recommend going as easy a gears as you can, because when you're absolutely destroyed and you need to get up really steep stuff, you're better off having some extra gears than having a higher top speed when you're going on any downhills. But the 38 and the 1044 worked really well for me. I was happy with that. I just had to push a little bit harder on those climbs. I run 165mm cranks, which is actually shorter than the stock 170s that come on the bike. Shorter cranks, I do believe, are good for shorter people. They just mean you don't have to lift your knee as high when you get over the top of the pedal stroke, and I find in turn that makes you a little bit more efficient on the bike, and they've worked well for me for the last 8 years that I have been riding them. While we're talking about the drivetrain as well, I do want to note that I use Ceramic Speed lube on my chain. I've been using Ceramic Speed the last couple of years. It works extremely well. I put a whole heap on the night before the event. I let it dry, and then I put another whole coating on there. So with Ceramic Speed lube, if you're doing a few day event, you want to put on quite a lot. You really need to coat the chain. You actually have to use a lot more than you would expect to out of the bottle, but it means that your chain is pretty coated. And then during the event, I just put on a little bit more. Again, I will talk about that more shortly. The wheels on this bike are the Zip 303 Firecrest. They're a carbon wheel set. They're slightly deeper. They're not too shallow, and they're designed obviously for racing, which is why the BMC Kaius comes with them. I found them nice and light for going up all the climbs in the Pyrenees. Had absolutely zero issues with the wheels, which was nice. The tires that I ran on the bike were the Pirelli Cinturato Gravel M. Now, as you can see on the bike setup behind me here, I've actually swapped back to the Pirelli Cinturato Gravel H that the BMC Kaius comes with, but for the event, I swapped out for the Gravel M tire, which are a little bit of a more robust tire, and I've run these a lot in the past. I did run them for Badlands and had zero issues. It's just unfortunate that if you did see the video from the El Piri event, you would have seen I had some tire issues throughout, but the tires themselves are pretty robust. They work well for bike packing. They're a 40C tire, so a little bit narrower than you would probably want to run for an event of this size. Unfortunately, the BMC Kaius only fits up to a 42C tire though, so you can't fit a really big tire in there, which is probably what I would recommend for an event of this length. Moving on to the saddle that I ran was the WTB SL8 with chromoly rails. This is the same saddle I ran at Atlas Mountain Race 2 years ago at Badlands last year, and I've got the same saddle on this bike again. I can't say I highly recommend it because saddles are a very personalized thing, but I have always had good experiences with that WTB SL8, so that was great for me. Okay, so let's move on to the bags that I used for this event. Now for El Piri being just 2 days, or at least I had planned for it to be just 2 days, I had 3 bags on the bike and they were all Apidura. The first bag was the Apidura 3-liter racing saddlebag. This was the same one I used at Badlands last year. In the rear saddlebag there, I had tools, I had a bit of food, I had some clothing, I had my emergency blanket, I had some spares, and I didn't carry any sleep system or any big clothing. For most people, this will not be a large enough size for all of the things you need if you're doing a bike packing event or ride. If you need to carry any winter clothing, any sleep system or anything like that, you'll want to go a 5-liter, a 7-liter, or even something like a 10 or a 13-liter bag on the rear to carry much more stuff. The lower bag I had on the frame there was the Apidura 2.4-liter frame pack. In this, I had my battery, I had cables, I had my pump, I had my tire plugs, I had some food, I had a small bottle of chain lube and some gels. Now, the things you want in a small frame bag like this are the things that you want to be able to access quickly when you need to. So things like high carbohydrate energy foods when you need them. You also want to have some spares that you need in a pinch. Things like tire plugs so you can fix a puncture quickly without having to dig through bags, and just anything else you might want to access quite quickly, like a pair of arm warmers or a gilet. I'm going to talk about where I kept those though mainly in a moment. On that 2.4-liter bag, there is a main zip which accesses the main compartment, and then there's also a small zip which accesses a small waterproof compartment on the left. In that small waterproof compartment, I had my ID, my credit cards, I had a little bit of cash, I had some spare contact lenses with me as well, I had glasses, wipes. So in that small pocket, I just kept some absolute necessities that if I needed to use them, I could, but I didn't actually need to really open that pocket at all, which was very helpful. The third and final bag I had on the bike there is the Apidura 1-liter bolt-on top tube bag. Now in this one, it's only 1 liter, it doesn't carry too much stuff, but I had a handful of gels in there. I had the action pod for my Insta360 camera, and I had my race tracker as well. Now it's very important when you're doing a race, because you need to have the tracker open to the sky basically, or at least only through one thin layer of something, you've got to put it in a top bag. So I put it in that top bag there so it has easy access to the GPS signal through it, and that worked really well. The GPS never dropped out. You can't put that tracker deep in a saddlebag or deep in the frame bag or something like that, because it will get lost. It won't be able to contact GPS as easily. One more bit of storage that I did have on the bike was a bottle on the frame there, and in that bottle I put my pair of arm warmers and my gilet for quick access. The reason I didn't put those in a bag was because I wanted to pull them out and be able to put them away in a pinch if I needed to. I find for bikepacking events, when you're doing a race and you're trying to push on, you want to stop for as short a time as possible. So by putting them in that bag there, when it did start to rain on the first day, I could just stop, I grabbed them out of the bottle really easily, and then I was able to stuff them away really easily when I needed to as well. The final bit of storage that I did have with me was that Salomon running vest. I've run the same running vest for Atlas Mountain Race, Badlands, and now for El Piri. It has water carrying capacity of about 3 liters. So I had 2 liters on my back, and then I had 2 small soft flasks on my chest, which were about 500 milliliters each. So I had plenty of water on my body there. It also has some additional pockets in and around the side, so I could fit food. I could fit my head torch battery in the back, which I will talk more about shortly. And yeah, I had all of the storage on me that I needed to, and it all worked really well. Alrighty, now moving on to the lights that I used for this event. Now, if you're doing a bikepacking event, lights are going to be a critical part of the puzzle for you to figure out. For me, it took me a long time to figure out, and I'm very happy that I got the support of Supernova lights at the end of last year when I did Badlands, and I used the same light again for this event. The light that I used is called the M99 B54 Pro. Now, this is a battery operated light with enough battery power for about 2 full nights. The high beam on this light is 1600 lumens, but at no point would you ever need to run 1600 lumens on full power. It's just not a necessity. This light has multiple modes which you can access via the phone app. So it does pair with your phone, and the phone app is great for changing modes. The low level that I ran the light on was literally 70 lumens, and then the highest level I ran it on was 450 lumens. But at no point did I ever need to go above that 450 lumens. As you can see in this footage here, the 450 lumens, because of the wide beam on the light, does plenty. Even moving at high speed, you can pretty much just run that one light and totally be fine. fine. But I did switch between the high mode and the low mode quite a lot throughout the event to keep that battery going, and I came home after 2 nights of riding and with still plenty of charge left in the battery. For anyone wondering, the whole Supernova setup, that battery and the light, weighs about 450 to 500 grams, so it's not crazy heavy. Obviously, it's not a dynamo setup, it's not going to last many nights, but if you are doing an event where you either need a bit of light or you need a couple of nights worth of light, it works really well, and I've been so happy with the Supernova product. I did actually reach out to them to ask them to support me, and they said yes, but had they not, I would have bought the product. Supernova, if you're watching, I would have bought your product if you had not given it to me, but I really appreciate you guys giving it to me. So the other front light I had with me was a head torch from Lezyne. Now that Lezyne head torch has about 1,000 lumens of output, but I ran it on like the lowest mode, which is probably only 100 or 150 lumens, and that coupled with the front light of the Supernova M99 B54 meant that I had plenty of power for the 2 lights that when I was moving at high speed, I could see absolutely everything. I could see around corners with that head torch, and when I needed both lights, it worked really well, and then when I didn't need both lights, I could just run one of them on it and conserve battery on the other. That head torch from Lezyne does have a battery pack and a cable, so you do need to run the battery somewhere. I ran it in the small backpack that's integrated into that Salomon running vest. It is a little bit heavy, but that battery also acts as a battery out, so if you are running low on any battery power, you can use that as a battery out, and it works as its own standalone battery as well. The rear light that I ran on the bike was the same rear light that I've used at Atlas Mountain Race at Badlands, and I used it again for El Piri. It's a Lezyne Strip Alert 150. I guess the 150 stands for 150 lumens. The thing has been absolutely smashed, as you can see. It's got dirt and mud all over it, but it keeps going. It lasted for about 8 or 10 hours, and then I charged it up during the day through the event, and then I used it again on the second night, no problem at all there. For this event, I took 2 spare Tubolito inner tubes. I took that Lezyne Pocket Drive hand pump, which I used a lot, as I said. I had a Dynaplug with both small and large plugs. I had a number of spares with me. I took a few zip ties as well, because they're always useful to have. I took some tire patches just in case on the off chance I needed to patch something. I took a set of loose Allen keys with me as well as a regular tool that you would use if you were just going out for a road ride or something like that. The reason for the loose Allen keys is you want to be able to access things with individual Allen keys and have that extra length on there so you can reach into spaces. I took a very small bottle of chain lube, and I only needed to lube the chain once, as I said, because of the fact that I applied a whole bunch of ceramic speed lube in the days before the event. I took some tire levers with me just in case I was going to have to remove the tire. These were some nice big chunky tire levers to make sure I could get those gravel tires off if I needed to. I took a CO2 with a CO2 inflator head, and the final thing I took was some CR2032 batteries so I could replace the batteries in the shifters if they died. Now those SRAM Red ETAP shifters are wireless, and so they need batteries, and if the shifters do die, you really want to be able to have some spare batteries. They're not very heavy to carry, so I had those in there, and I could have replaced the shifter batteries if I needed to, but I didn't need to, thankfully, and it was all good. Alrighty, now let's move on to one part of the event that I think I didn't get quite right, and that was my battery pack, or it did actually work fine. It was a 10,000 milliamp hour battery, but the reason it didn't work perfectly was because I ran out of battery power on the last day. My phone actually ran out within the last couple of Ks of the event, and my Garmin actually ran out 500 meters from the finish line. That 10,000 milliamp hour battery I took was enough to charge my phone a couple of times and the Garmin once. I also charged the Insta360 camera and my rear light with it as well. So I got by, but I could have done with a bit more. Like I should have just taken the 20,000 milliamp hour battery that I have here at home anyway. It was just a bit larger, so I went with a smaller battery pack with only 10,000 milliamp hours. I took a few extra cables with me along the way. I always take 2 of every single cable that I might need. So 2 iPhone cables, 2 USB-A, USB-C cables as well. So you got cables just in case any of the cables screw up. You do want to be able to charge things. And then on top of that, I took an Anker 65 watt wall charger. Now, had anything gone really wrong and I'd had to stop anywhere for a long period of time in like an establishment or something like that, I could have plugged that 65 watt wall charger into the wall, charged all my gear at once if I needed to, and then got back out on the road. But I didn't want to try and stop, or I wanted to stop for as little as possible. So I took the Anker wall charger as a backup, but I didn't end up using it. My navigation for this event, as you will have seen, was the Garmin 840 Solar. Now I used to be on Wahoo. I swapped to Garmin. I have no affiliation with either brand. I only swapped to Garmin for the fact that I just wanted to try a different device, and I liked the idea of a solar charging unit. The solar panels on the Garmin solar units are good. They're not great. The new Coros unit that has just been announced, like it got announced a few days ago, has way better battery life and it has a way better solar charging unit. I'm really interested to try out that Coros and see what it's going to be like, but that Coros unit has 120 hours of battery, whereas the Garmin probably lasted me, say, about 16 to 18 hours or so when you have the mapping function on. So an interesting little one with the Garmin, but yeah, I swapped from the Wahoo because I just wanted to try something different, and the solar charging did help, but it wasn't absolutely amazing. Now, this event being in the Pyrenees meant that it was potentially going to get quite cold at night, but also in summer, the UV is really high in the mountains and it gets very, very hot in the day. The main kit that I wore was a pair of Attaquer all-day adventure cargo bib shorts. I've run those bibs non-stop. I talk about them all the time. If you've watched any of my other videos, you would have either seen me riding in them or heard me talking about them. Attaquer all-day adventure bib shorts have cargo pockets in either side, and they also have a couple of kidney pockets on the back as well, so you can store things in the back. The chamois is really comfortable, the fabric is really comfortable, and I will never change from those Attaquer bib shorts. I absolutely love them. The next thing that I wore was the Attaquer Race Ultra Climbers jersey. I've used this Attaquer jersey in all 3 ultras I've done because it's so lightweight. The reason I go for a really lightweight jersey for bikepacking events is that you can only take off so many layers, whereas you can always put on more layers. So if it's cold, you can add additional layers to warm up, whereas when it's really, really hot, you don't want to have any extra thickness on your body that you don't need. The next thing I took with me was the Attaquer Race Rain Gilet. Now, this is a sort of rain-proof or splash-proof, spray-proof gilet, whatever you want to call it. It's quite stretchy, it's very comfortable. And I paired that with a pair of arm warmers as well to keep me warm. On top of that, I also took a Giro rain jacket, which is just a cheap rain jacket that I've got that it can get trashed in bikepacking events. I put that over the top of everything when I was a bit cold to add that layer of wind protection for me. And then I also took a buff with me as well because it did get quite cold up in the mountains. Now, the temperature for this event ranged between about 2 or 3 degrees in the very middle of the night up the top of the mountains, up to 40 degrees Celsius during the day when I was climbing in the heat. So a big range of temperatures, and the kit that I took with me did actually basically cover me for the entire lot, apart from the second morning when I was very, very cold coming down into Rebus to Fresa. But as soon as I started climbing again up the final climb, I ended up warming up and I took off all those layers again anyway, and it was all good. I also took with me a pair of knee warmers as well, because knee warmers are better than leg warmers in terms of just being able to slip something on. Knee warmers you can put on and off very easily. If it gets too hot, you can just roll them up and roll them down, and they're not too much in the way. In terms of my socks, I ran a pair of merino wool socks. Merino wool is really good because if your feet get wet, they don't stay wet and soggy. The final 2 things I did use were a pair of Quoc Grand Tourer shoes. The Quoc Grand Tourers have some boas on there. I find for bikepacking events like this, I prefer having boa dials rather than laces, because if your fingers get a bit numb, which often they do if you're doing long days in the saddle, or at least for me, I got a little bit of numb fingers, it's harder to do up your laces, whereas with boa dials, you can just dial them in. And then the last thing I took was a pair of Rule 28 gloves. These are a set of aero gloves. I wasn't using them because they were aero. That's just ridiculous for a bikepacking event where my average speed was 17 kilometers an hour. I use them because they have quite a lot of padding on the palms. So I found that padding really good. I've run those in road races because they are aero, but also they have a lot of padding and they're very comfortable. So those Rule 28 gloves have been absolutely trashed now over the last couple of years, but I've used them, I've enjoyed them, and they work well. Alrighty, so a few of the extra little accessories that I did take and I did use along the way, but are not kind of fitting into any one category. I used a Coros heart rate strap and a Coros watch with me as well. The Coros heart rate strap was actually a band that goes on my arm as opposed to a traditional heart rate chest strap. The reason I prefer the arm band strap is the fact that I don't like having anything across my chest underneath my clothing that feels a little bit restrictive, whereas the band on your arm is just a lightweight band. It doesn't really do too much, and it measures your heart rate in the same way. And then I ran the Coros watch as well. That's the Apex 2. I always run a watch during bikepacking events because it's good when you stop anywhere to just be able to glance at the time, and then glance at the time when you leave again and see, okay, I've stopped for 15 minutes or something like that, or maybe you can just keep track of time. If you are kind of looking to do these events more in a racing style and stop for less periods of time, having the time right accessible there means that you always just keep a bit of an eye on it, as opposed to only having the time either on your phone or on your cycling computer. I also carried with me a couple of sachets of Peloton sunscreen. I've spoken about Peloton in the past. Peloton's my favorite cycling related sunscreen. It's super lightweight to put on. It's really, really breathable. And these little sachets for bikepacking events are great because you can chuck a couple in your bag. They don't weigh anything. And then you put them on at the start of the day. Their sunscreen lasts all the way throughout the day. You can check out Peloton if you'd like to. There's a link in the description as well. One of the other things I'll mention is that I did run a pair of Oakley Jawbreaker photochromic glasses. Now, photochromic glasses are great because they go light during the night, or they go clear during the night, and then they go dark during the day. So you can keep them on all the way through the evening. You don't have to take them off. I find that good when you're on gravel. You don't want to have dust and stuff blowing in your eyes. So the photochromic glasses are a really good way of stopping that happening. And then during the day, you can just leave them on. You can put them on at sunrise, or you can have them on overnight, and then you can wear them through to sunrise. And then as the sky lightens up, the glasses go darker and darker, and they just work really, really well. So photochromic glasses, highly recommended. I have Oakley's. I have no affiliation with Oakley, unfortunately. I do really like their product. But yeah, I would recommend some photochromic glasses from any of your favorite brand, rather than just wearing dark glasses during the day and taking them off at night. Let's talk about the camera setup that I had. So I film all of my riding vlogs usually on a combination of an iPhone and an Insta360 camera. Now, Insta360 is a brand that I've been working with more and more over the last little while. They make really, really good action cameras. So the device that I was using to film the video that you would have seen, I didn't use all the footage from it, but I did use a lot of action footage from it, is the Insta360 Go 3S. Now, this is a small, very, very small, lightweight camera. As you can see, it's got a little action pod there, and then it's got the camera itself, which slots out. I ran the camera on a chest clip that you basically magnetize onto this magnet pendant necklace. So I had the pendant necklace around my neck, and then I had the camera on the clip, which I then magnetized through my jersey onto that pendant necklace, and it meant that it just sat on my chest there and acted like a chest cam. And then you can also pull the camera off and use it like a regular action camera, just pointing it around if you need to. And I did actually film some speaking right on the end of the last day because my phone was basically out of battery at that point. So having that second backup camera was really useful. The camera itself only weighs 40 grams and it lasts for about 40 minutes, but that action pod means that you can charge it up again and again and again. You get about 3 or 4 charges out of the action pod. You can get about 2.5 hours worth of battery out of the action pod if you run it with that screen. And then the rest of the time I'm using my phone to film. I find that combination of an Insta360 and an iPhone work really well to document an event like this. And as you will have seen, if you've seen the video or any of my videos, that I've used that combination the last couple of years and they worked really, really well. Alrighty, now to wrap this up, let's just get down to the final thing, and that is nutrition. Now, nutrition is quite a personalized thing. I don't want to give you guys advice, but I am going to tell you what I did. For this event, I had a combination of a bunch of Fuel Plus gels, which have 50 grams of carbohydrates in them. I also had Fuel Plus carbohydrate powder that I started with. I had a couple of sachets of that. I also had some protein powder sachets as well, and a couple of extra gels which had some caffeine in them. Plus, I sat down on the first night and had a big bocadillo sandwich with some ham and some cheese on it, a couple of Cokes and a couple of chocolate donuts. That got me through the first night, and then I actually got one of those bocadillo sandwiches to take away with me. I carried it with me all the way through the first night, and I ate it at about midday on the second day. So I had a bit of real food with me as well, as much as you can consider that real food, but it worked. I also got a bunch of Haribo that you might have seen. I ate a lot of sugar. You really need to just basically stockpile sugar. Every time you stop, you want to eat something that's sweet to keep you going. You need a lot of fuel for these kinds of events, but you guys will have to figure out what works well for you guys. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do whack a like on it. And if you would like to subscribe to the channel, I would love to have you along. I cracked 50,000 subscribers earlier this year, and I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's subscribed. That's a huge number. It's so much larger than I ever expected to get, but I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined me for the journey so far. I am going to be bringing out more videos over the course of this next year and into the future. So thank you once again, and I will see you guys all in another episode of Tristan Take Video very, very soon. Adeu.